my whole life was curated by design to create safety, but safety was the trauma of my parents. It was their trauma that I was living out without even realizing it.
The way that women show up as mothers and how they have to give and how we're deemed to give and what it means to have self-love. But I can automatically in my head, I can hear listeners who come from very collectivist cultures.
We need to understand is that in order for me to give to the max, I have to give to myself first. That's the most important piece. I give my overflow, but if the overflow isn't there, then I'm taking from my core. And if I'm taking from my core, then energetically, I'm going to start to resent what I'm giving to. And that was a lot of my journey, was not knowing that I had to fill myself up first and giving too much of my core and then resenting the things that I really loved or wanted to give to.
You may have moments and seasons where you're not connected to them anymore because of what you're going through, but you may circle back. And so to say this black and white thing of you are now out of my life because you're no longer the version that I'm vibing with it's in a form its own toxicity. Yes, there are 100% going to be people that need to be cut out. Absolutely. Because they're just going to because they are not ready for that journey and they are not there. And it's hard to be in that space. Behind every opinion, every conflict, and every moment of courage, there is a human story longing to be understood. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and this is Reframing Perspectives, a space for conversations that help us see ourselves and each other with more honesty and curiosity so that we can build empathy and compassion in our world. Here in these episodes, we're going to explore the layers of what it means to be human in leadership, in society, and in our everyday lives, and how by understanding those layers, it can reshape our relationships, our communities, and our impact. So let's step inside and let's begin. When we talk about self-love, we often think of it as something we learn in adulthood, after the heartbreak, after the burnout, after the moments that force us to stop and ask, what about me? But what if we went back to the beginning, back to childhood, when we first set learning what love even means, who got it easily and who had to earn it, how our families, our neighborhoods, and our culture quietly taught us what we were worthy of and how they shaped us. My guest today, Dr. Jasmine Escalera, who's a dear friend of mine, is someone who has lived that evolution from those early lessons to complete reinvention of what it means to love yourself. After her divorce, Jasmine found herself rebuilding her life through radical self-love, not the surface kind, but the kind that asks you to face every part of who you are and choose yourself fully. She's the founder of the Courage Crew, a reinvention community for women ready to write the next chapter of their lives within themselves as the main character. Her work is about helping people to stop settling, heal what they've internalized, and step into a version of self-love that changes how they love everyone else too. In this conversation, we go deep into what love meant to her as a little girl, what self-love has taught her as a woman, and how learning to truly love ourselves can transform not just our lives, but our communities and the way that we connect as humans. Come join me in this conversation with one of the loveliest humans that I get to call my friend. Jasmine, one of my favorite humans in the world. Hello, welcome.
Hello, you are one of my favorite humans in the world, so I'm glad that we have that in common.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to dive into everything that you are one of the few, and I will say this really honestly, and I don't say this to like everyone to say you are one of the few, like you really are one of the few who has been so transparent about your journey with self-love. And you have been so open about what that means, what that looks like. And I'll be honest, like as your friend and as someone who's been in your life now for like almost like 5 years, which is wild. In this journey, as I see you, like it really makes me also just like think about like, oh my God, how am I showing up for myself, you know? And am I doing like, I see that and it's just like, you've just become this inspiration. So I'm just so excited to dive in to this journey about self-love because I feel like a lot of times people mistake self-love for being selfish, and it's not actually being selfish. It's self-love is the core of what allows you to really be there in community, be there for your relationships. But it all starts with that piece. So I can't wait to dig into everything about your journey.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I think you got it exactly right. often we are told, especially as women, that we have to put everyone else above ourselves. And I think that is the beautiful journey and part of being a woman, is that I do want to give. I do want to provide. But you hit the nail on the head with saying that society can often label us as being selfish, when really what we need to understand is that in order for me to give to the max, I have to give to myself first. That's the most important piece. I give my overflow, but if the overflow isn't there, then I'm taking from my core. And if I'm taking from my core, then energetically, I'm going to start to resent what I'm giving to. And that was a lot of my journey, was not knowing that I had to fill myself up first and giving too much of my core and then resenting the things that I really loved or wanted to give to.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that exact piece of like, we're taught to just give and give and give, that in the beginning, you don't notice it. You don't actually notice that. You think that, you're just so excited to give, because we're also taught and told that by giving and by, volunteering and being out there, like it actually does provide more happiness and joy internally. People who tend to give more, they do have that level of genuine joy in their life. But what isn't told is that happens when you know that you're in your own safety of yourself. Mm-hmm. I want to start with just first asking, what did love look like growing up as a kid? What did that look like in your neighborhood? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think about love in general when it comes to my community. So I grew up in the projects of Brooklyn, New York in the 80s and the 90s. I was born in 1982. And for anyone who grew up in New York during that time, it was very community centric. So especially growing up in the projects, we were kind of isolated. We were sort of siloed. So love to me meant community. Love to me meant being a kid and having every parent be your parent, and almost kind of feeling like every kid was somehow a part of your extended family. But in my nuclear family, so meaning my parents, love to me felt a lot like seeking love. My parents had me very young. They were 19 when they got married, 20 when they had me. And for anyone who is a Latina, a woman of color, coming from particular cultures, our parents didn't have the same capacity to heal or work through their trauma that we have the privilege to do now. It just wasn't available, especially in communities like mine where you had to focus on putting, food on the table. That was the primary concern, was hustling to be able to take care of your family. So my parents had a lot of trauma from their family, a lot of trauma from what they experienced growing up. And I don't believe that they understood nor knew how to be the parents that maybe I wanted them to be as a kid. So self-love for me, or love in general, was a lot about seeking love from my community, seeking that support from other people, because my parents weren't always available to give it to me. So it was a lot of seeking as a child. But I do want to say that I always say that my childhood was absolutely amazing because I did have that support system from the community. And it's something that was so incredibly important to the way that I grew up, was understanding that community is something that is incredibly important, and that even though you may not get love from the people you expect to give it to you, that you can get it from the people that you choose to be in your heart.
There's so many points in there that I think are so important to dive in deeper, because when you talk about, growing up in the 80s and 90s and growing up in this place where it's like your neighborhood and your community is like every parent is a parent, I feel like that is also something that is just so real for a lot of people of color. You grow up in this way where there aren't these boundaries, and there isn't this thing of oh, I have to call ahead before I come over to your place. No, you're just coming over, and when you start to set those boundaries and you start to kind of set that, hey, can you call before you come? There's this deep offense that gets being taken from people. This idea of how dare, am I not your family anymore? Are you treating me like some stranger? There's all of these nuances of what it means to be in relationship with community when it comes to what that love is. How can you still show up with love to your community in this way that feels like family, but still honor yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I get asked this question a lot. And in fact, I had a similar conversation with my sister. This becomes the question of how do I set boundaries, even with the people who don't understand why I'm setting the boundaries or I don't want to say respect, because I do think that your family wants to respect you. There's just a difference there. And I think when it comes to family and when it comes to parents, they still see you as the child versus seeing you as the adult. So for me, setting boundaries and loving myself, especially when it comes to community or when it comes to family, is all about really having them understand the why behind the boundary. So it's essential that we set boundaries, but it's also essential that we communicate those boundaries to the individuals that we need to communicate those boundaries with, and that we communicate them in the way of love. In order for me to love myself the most, frankly, I cannot be around you at this moment. And we have to honor that the other individual gets to have whatever emotions around that boundary setting they need to have. But it is not my place to adjust your emotions. It is my place to honor my truth, to tell you my truth, to communicate that truth, and to hold space for love that you will accept and honor that truth as well. But one of the biggest things that I've learned to say to myself is that sounds like a you problem. And that can often mean your emotions around me setting these boundaries sounds like a you problem. And that's just something that you have to handle. And it sounds a little aggressive. It sounds a little harsh. But what is really important for me is that I can love everyone to the maximal of my capabilities. And I cannot do that if someone doesn't respect nor honor the way I choose to love myself or the way I choose to love them.
You know, you're talking and it's bringing up this moment. So I feel like in my life, I am definitely a giver. I love to give to my friends. I love to show up. You know, I have a lot of empathy. And I will say, by the way, empathy is something that I learned. I'm not a natural empath, but like it was something I learned. But even in that, I give and give and give. And there's this massive guilt that I feel if I want to take a moment and not pick up a phone or not, just give myself that quiet space. And I was just thinking about this the other day because I feel like so much of my life is a lot of performance, right? Business is performance, podcasting, you have to be on, you're on all the time and because my work is so much in human behavior and it's about reframing perspectives and it's about empathy and all of these things, I feel like as a small business owner, like I am always just like, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. And when friends are reaching out, I have this reaction at times because I can tell which friend is reaching out because they just want to bitch and vent versus which friends are reaching out just to kind of talk or whatever. And I noticed that the friends where I know they just want to bitch and vent about whatever's going on, I'm tapped out and I don't have the space necessarily. And it's like this idea of like, okay, well, let me just be there for them over text message because I just don't have the energy to like talk on the phone. But even that I feel like is compromising sometimes instead of just being able to say to them, hey, listen, I've got a lot going on my plate. Here are the things that are happening in my life that, by the way, you didn't even ask me, how are you? And, how's everything on your side of the world before I start like putting everything on top of it. And what I've started to do is literally say that. I've actually started to say like, listen, here are some of the things that are going on in my life. And I can create space for you to talk about and have the spaciousness that you deserve on Sunday or on, in 5 days from now. But right now, my brain is just trying to check things off the list of things that I need to just get done. I'm happy to text with you here and there over the few days, but I'm going to reach out to you in a few days. But there's still this ping of like, I'm being a bad friend. I'm not being a good friend because if someone's going through something, I should be there for them. How have you, in your journey of self-love, been able to create that balance of showing up and your friends or family being able to understand that and respecting it without that ping of guilt?
That's interesting because I think the guilt still comes. I would love to be able to be available very much like you. A lot of my life can feel, I wouldn't use the word necessarily performance, but like I'm giving, I'm always giving and it is exhausting. And so when the laptop shuts down, when the phone goes down, there's not much time for me to reach generate. And it's actually kind of funny. So people who have encountered me in real life versus encountered me like in the space of social media oftentimes will be kind of put off a little bit, because me in real life is very quiet, very calm, I'm building my energy so that I can be in front of the people that I need to be in front of and give to the maximal. It's almost kind of like I'm draining the battery, and then the battery needs to recharge when I'm not in front of my community or in front of the people that I want to serve. And so the guilt does definitely come in those moments where I need that quiet time. But I think what's really important that I've learned is that it's okay to both have some guilt, process that guilt, and still set your boundaries. I don't think that the world is a this or a that. I actually think that there is a lot of duality in emotions and a lot of duality in the way that we live, meaning that I can feel both a little bit guilty if I can't give to you right now, especially if you're someone that I love and that I want to give to. But it is my duty to process that, to understand that, and to still hold firm the boundary that I know that I need to give to myself to be able to best give to you when I'm available to give, or give to whomever. So I think there's, I once was very much like this, where I was like, it has to be this or it has to be that. But I do believe that emotions can coexist. Negative emotions, or what we would call negative emotions, and positive emotions. I can feel both guilty and also pleasant about honoring the boundaries that I'm setting for myself.
I think you hit it right on the nail there, because it's that when we try to suppress one of the emotions and try to highlight the other one, that's when we feel off balance, right? It's just like being able to say like, you know what, I feel really guilty about this, but at the same time, if I don't do this right now, I'm actually going to end up resenting that phone call. I'm actually going to end up getting on that call, and they're not going to get me fully present, and they're going to find me irritating, because it's like, you're not even really being there for me. I'm going through something really challenging. So being able to say that, like, I feel really guilty that I can't do this, but I also know, like, almost being able to think a little bit more long-term about that quality of conversation, community, relationships, connection, is that if I take care of me in this moment, I'm going to be able to be so much better in tomorrow for that person.
Yeah, 110%. I think that is so incredibly important. And it's all about the checking in with yourself. It's all about understanding what is going on internally with me. Why am I feeling this way? What does it mean? And then making a choice, knowing that you have the power to choose.
What were the unspoken rules as a young girl that you learned about this piece of self-love, about you showing up and being able to claim, like, was there even a part of you that thought about, oh, wait a second, I need to take care of myself? What were the unspoken rules that you learned in your family, in your neighborhood, about what it means to be in relationships with others as a girl?
That's a great question. I would say that it's kind of interesting growing up in the area that I grew up in, because there was so much of a protection and a safety that had to happen just because of what was going on in that environment, and especially going on in the 90s in that environment. So there was a lot of self-protection and a lot of self-preservation, but then there was also this equally beautiful community-centric mindset where it was like, we have to protect ourselves and we have to protect our family. So you almost kind of put this armor on, but you also wanted to be available to your community. So I think that what I learned about love is that there is a barrier, right? There is a boundary that people cannot cross. And it's like you can give, but there's almost this invisible barrier behind that. And so I don't think that I ever fully gave myself to anyone in regards to love, because I thought that I can give, but only to a certain extent. And once those vulnerabilities start to come into play, or once you start to cross the boundary and I start to feel unsafe, then that's where, boom, we start to shut down. So I think I always thought that love was something that you give to a certain extent. And that certain extent was where the love started to translate into potential vulnerability or lack of safety.
Wow. So, when you're talking about that armor and you're talking about that, I can love up to a certain extent. What did that look like when you started to grow up, started dating, started to put yourself out there? What was that extent?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you 100% this was the part that I played in my marriage not working out. So I got married when I was 28 years old, actually, I think 29 years old. And I married a wonderful man. We were not each other's life partner, for sure. I can look back and say that. We didn't have the same core values as we started to grow as a partnership. But what I can say was my take-home message there was that I didn't really ever let him see me for who I was. I didn't ever really let him understand who the Jasmine was behind the armor. There were so many moments where he wanted to be the man, the protector, the provider, that kind of old school mentality man that many of us are even looking for right now. And I did not allow him to do that because that would have meant that I had to be in a vulnerable space in terms of our partnership and in terms of love. So there was a lot of me that fought back the love or pushed away the love because I was just not capable of allowing him to see the fullest, realist version of me because that was just too unsafe for me. So I would say that it represented itself in my marriage and in all of my relationships. In particular, I'm talking about relationships with men. There might even be some friendships where I don't know that people actually see me for who I really am or saw me for who I really was. I didn't let them.
I think that this is such a common experience about the way that we define what it means to be vulnerable. And I think that sometimes the way that we think we're being emotionally available is by giving and is by showing up glammed up and that look at us like, I'm giving gifts and I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to do in a relationship. Check, check, check. I'm meeting the family. I'm doing these things, but these are all just the layer of milestones. It's not actually what you just touched on is that our values weren't the same. So when you don't have values that are similar, it's hard to actually participate in a partnership because you're not on the same journey that you're both wanting to get to and you're operating from different places. And that is where I feel like a lot of times women compromise their self-love to themselves in order to almost in the idea of, oh my gosh, I need to be married, I need to have kids, I need to have the house, the dog, the whole thing, they start folding themselves into the version that this person wants them to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And that causes a lot of identity loss. And I find that, couples who get married early in their 20s, there's this idea of course, you get married early in your 20s, you're a lot more flexible, you're not set in your ways, so it's a little bit easier. But at the same time, on the other side of that is that you still don't know yourself. And because you don't know yourself, you're taking a risk of like either you're gonna end up on the same journey or you're gonna end up on two very different paths. But what does that, what was that like looking back for yourself, having come out of that divorce? And I feel like that was a really pivotal moment for you of how much of yourself that you folded into to allow him to be the man that he wanted to be. And you just shattered yourself. Like how much of, do you think that you lost yourself in that?
Oh, I was already lost though. So I realize looking back that my life was created to live in a bubble of safety and the definition of safety was provided to me by my parents. Growing up, we grew up in poverty. We grew up in the projects. We saw a lot of terrible things happen. And there were so many moments in my life, I can envision them where, I'd be walking with my dad or we'd be sitting in the apartment and the gunshots would be going. And he would look at me and he would say, you don't want this. You never want this. And what that translated to was go to school, get a degree, get a six-figure job, which now it's probably more than that. But when I was growing up, it was the six-figure job, the 401k health insurance, find a partner, get a home, get out. It was always about getting out. Like that was the mission. The mission was get out. And so my whole life was curated by design to create safety, but safety was the trauma of my parents. It was their trauma that I was living out without even realizing it. And there's nothing that I'm putting on them. I just didn't know any better. So it wasn't the marriage that made me lost. It was the checklist that I was given from when I was a child that created the lost. And so when I got into the marriage, it was just another checkbox. And I did love my husband and he did love me, but it definitely felt like it was filling that box rather than me saying, well, how can I both create safety and fulfillment? What would it look like to both be safe and be happy? What would it look like to have safety and live a passion-filled life? For me, those things did not go together. It was safety. It wasn't safety and happiness. It was hustle for success and to be able to be okay for the rest of your life. And so when I got married, I was just checking a box. I loved him, but I was still checking a box. I was already lost. And so that marriage, without me knowing it, definitely started a process. It started a process of me realizing that there was something that had to change. But it actually didn't happen until my second relationship, until my relationship after my marriage, where I realized I had repeated the exact same pattern that I was repeating in my adult life. And that was changing myself, or not even changing myself, but not even trying to find myself, to have someone love me so that I could be safe. And that's when I really started to realize there's something here that I need to look at. There's something here that I need to investigate. But it took many years to realize what I'm just saying to you, that I lived a path of someone else's trauma. And it brings me a lot of pain to say that, but it also brings me a lot of satisfaction to know it and to every single day wake up and ask myself, are you living the pain or are you living the happy? Because my job now is to live the happy.
Oh, Jasmine, was it 3 years ago now that you moved to Miami?
3 years, yeah.
3 years ago, October, you moved to Miami. And I still remember that journey that you had taken from New York and, in search of, I've got to go and do something different and something else is calling my name. And you decided to take this road trip down with your dog, with Cody, and head down to the beach area. Do you think that it is important to move away from your environment in order to actually explore the things that you're talking about with self-love?
I should have gotten some tissues because you're bringing a lot out in me, because it was 3 years ago exactly. It was for me. It was for me. I didn't believe that I could heal myself and be in the space where the trauma occurred. I didn't believe that I could go through what I needed to go through and still be surrounded by the same pain. I do not think that that has to be everyone's journey. And I was blessed to be able to leave. And what I realize now is I am extremely blessed. And I say that because I am free. I am free, completely free, untethered, to really focus on the healing that I need to do and the healing that is required to really break the chains for my family. And I believe that the reason why I have been single, I haven't had children, is because I have chosen that. But I believe it's also because this is my journey. This is what I am supposed to do. And I take it so seriously every single day. I do not think you have to leave your environments. I do think healing can happen in partnership. In fact, I think that deep transformative healing can happen in partnership. If you're with the right partner who wants to go on that journey with you and support you in that journey, I think that healing can be so beautiful when you are doing it in a family unit. But for me, I needed to go. And it brings up a lot of pain for me, because there were moments where I couldn't even be with my family, be with my parents, because I resented them so much. And I had to heal that resentment and realize that they did everything that they possibly could with the resources that they had, including their spiritual resources. But I think that everyone's healing journey is allowed to look how it should look. And you can do it no matter what circumstance you are in.
I think that part right there of resenting the parents, until you realize they were doing the best they can. That is such a core part of having that compassion and empathy, right? It's realizing that. And people tend to make, and sadly, just because of social media and everything, that growth is this beautiful journey. And they've kind of created a little bit of toxicity around the real challenges that actually do come up with healing. They've softened it in a way that when someone starts experiencing growth, they're like, this isn't, I thought it was supposed to be like me flying on a swing in Bali and feeling the freedom of the wind, and why am I not feeling that? Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling frustrated? Why am I sad? And it's because that is actually healing. That is actually when we're confronting some of those emotions. And I think one of the most powerful parts of it is when you're able to release and see your parents as parents and humans and hold that they are also human beings that are living this life for the first time, or this particular life for the first time, I should say, if you believe in reincarnation. They're living this life for the first time and they are doing what they can. They didn't intentionally mean to do what they did. They were bound by their circumstances. And let's be real, baby boomers weren't exactly the emotional EQ, let's grow type of human. Something happened. They did the hippies stage and then they were out. And so it was just, I think that part is really powerful. I always say that everything that is worth building in your life begins with how you make people feel, whether that's your relationships, your business, or your community. It's how you make people feel. And you can only have a healthy relationship with your parents once you recognize and see them as human beings who are just going about life trying to do something.
Absolutely. Or working on my self-love was one of the biggest reasons why I came to that place with my parents. Because for me, I realized that in order to love myself, I have to fully accept myself, which means that I have to fully accept every single component of my life, every single challenge, every single person, every single experience. I have to accept that it has created the woman that I am today. If I'm going to love me, then I have to fully accept this woman. But this woman was forged by two loving parents who didn't know how to love. It was forged by a community where many things happened that shouldn't have happened, but they created strength and resilience. So I had to really almost kind of do a timeline, a chronology of all of the things that Jasmine has experienced in her life, traumatic and great, and say, I accept. Because if I love me today, then I have to accept what created this version of me. And so self-acceptance, to me, is one of the biggest foundations of self-love, is do you accept who you are today and every single thing that created that version of you, including the oftentimes very hard to accept traumas.
Hi, friends. I have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying these episodes, then I'd really love it if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your friends and family. Your words help others discover that the stories and these episodes exist in the perspectives that we're exploring over here. And the more that we can grow, the more feedback that we get from you through those reviews, the more we can make sure that we're creating meaningful episodes that you want to listen to. You have no idea how much this helps and how much I appreciate you for doing this. So if you don't mind, whether it's following us, subscribing, hitting the button below, if you can leave a review for us, or if you just share this with your friends and family, the episodes that you think that they would really resonate with, it means more to us than you can imagine. Thank you so much. When you talked about self-love and the acceptance of yourself, what it brings back is the moment when you talked about your marriage and that partnership. And you started it with, I'm going to talk about the part that I was responsible for. And I think that that is so unique and interesting because a lot of times people focus on, well, let me tell you all the things he did wrong. Let me tell you all the things that my partner was in fault for. And they're not seeing their version of who they were in act of that. And I think that is just a poignant moment of showing self-acceptance of yourself, taking responsibility of your actions. I consider that to be an act of self-love. And I'm curious too, when you see yourself today as this woman who has gone through one heck of a journey, when you see yourself in this moment today, what would you say are the requirements to show up with self-love for yourself?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. I think I'm having a lot of fun with self-love. So I would say that some of the requirements of self-love, one of which is for sure self-acceptance and acceptance of the journey to become the version of you are today. I would also say fun, joy, play are huge components of self-love for me now. I think it's essential. And that component is really important for me because I grew up so much in an environment of hustle and grind that I got to play when I was a kid, but play was also very different. Like we were entrepreneurs when we were kids. Every single game that we played was to try to hustle money from somebody because that's the environment that we were in. So for me now, transforming the hustle into love is really about being more playful, being more joyful, having more fun. I think another big component of self-love is worth and value, understanding that you are worthy to love yourself, you are worthy to have more, and that you see the value and the contribution that you make in the world each day. Self-love for me is also pleasure. I think a big component of self-love that we don't talk enough about is women loving their bodies in all the ways that it deserves to be loved. And so self-pleasure, devotion to self, there's so many different ways to love yourself, and self-care is another one. We talked about boundaries, which I think is one of the most important aspects of self-care, is putting boundaries around your time to take care of yourself, putting boundaries around your energy so that you can give to yourself. So self-love is so multifaceted, but it's really just about each and every day saying, how do I make sure that I am at the forefront of my day, that I am choosing to give to myself just as much as I am choosing, if not more, to give to others. So I think self-love is a radical and revolutionary thing, especially for women, because essentially what it says is, yes, you are so important, but you are not as important as me. And that's really challenging when you think about women, when you think about mothers, and when you think about partnership, because we are often told to put everything and everyone above ourselves. And what I think is most important, and this is very important for whoever is the person who comes into my life next as a partner, for me to be very clear on, I am the first one in my life. Number one, just as I expect for you to be the first one in yours, because that's what true self-love means.
I agree with you 100% about, the way that women show up as mothers and how they have to give and how we're deemed to give and what it means to have self-love. But I can automatically in my head, I can hear listeners who come from very collectivist cultures saying that, oh, well, that's easy to say when you don't have kids. That's easy to say when you're single. That's easy to say when you don't live near your family or these things, right? And it's all of these excuses, I will say. I'll call it out as that, is that they are to some degree excuses in my head of facing what it means that to still belong in a community while still protecting yourself. And I'm just so curious too, when people come up to you and, you've got your Courage Crew where you really help women reinvent themselves and reinvent what their identity and their life is going to look like. When you get that resistance from these women who their nervous system is up in, just chaos because it's like, oh my God, Jasmine, what are you asking me to do here? How do you respond to them? How do you respond to that person who's just getting started on that journey, but has all of these complex pressures around them and they're like, how do I do this while I'm still in this system?
Oh, I love that you're bringing this up because I want to say that I do have privileges that are different than others, right? I am single. I do not have children. I have Cody. I can leave him alone for however long his bladder can take, but I don't have the same responsibilities as other people do. That is a privilege. However, reinvention is a choice. Transformation is a choice. It starts with a choice. And the choice is I deserve to live my life in joy, in peace, in freedom. I deserve to have more. I deserve to feel fulfilled. I deserve that when I take my last breath, that I know that I gave this my all. And by my all, I don't mean pushing. I mean having that bliss. And so it starts with just the choice to say, even though I have these other external factors, I will choose to give myself the moments that I can. And so I think that's where the starting point is. The choice to say, I desire and deserve more. And so thus I will prioritize myself. It can look like moments in a day. I do have the capability of being able to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take 2 hours to walk my dog and go to the gym and watch the sunrise. That doesn't mean that I don't have other things going on in my life. And that's something that you also know, growing a business. So I work full time and I run my business. Those are my babies. So it's really about the choice. And I like that you called it out as an excuse. That might sound harsh to some people, but it is an excuse that your mind is putting in front of your transformation. It is not an excuse that you actually believe. It is an excuse that's coming from your comfort zone. It is an excuse that's coming from your nervous system. It is an excuse that's coming from a part of you that doesn't want the change to happen, not because there's not better on the other side, but because change comes with discomfort. Change comes with change. And so that is something that your nervous system, your brain, your mind is just not used to. So it will trigger those excuses and it will trigger those fears, but you can overcome them just by saying, I choose to start. And that's where it begins. And what I really want people to understand is that transformation can start in moments. It doesn't have to be hours. Transformation starts in a choice. And that's where we begin. And so a lot of what I do is providing bite-sized, easy to digest, fit in your day or week tips and tools for women so that they don't have to trigger the excuse, they can trigger the change. And that's what's really important to me is let's make this easy and accessible for you so that you get to feel something different. I remember going on my first psilocybin experience, and I've never done mushrooms before, but it was one of the most transformative journeys for me. And it allowed me to feel something different than I normally feel on my day-to-day. And that's what I want women to do. Give yourself a moment so that in that moment you feel something really different than what you normally feel. And then you attach to that feeling and you say, I want more of that. I want to feel that more. How do I get more of that? Well, it's by giving yourself more of those moments where you can. Just start.
There's so much there that comes up. And I think about the women, and to your point, there's these choices that you get to make. And I think that living in a place like the US, which is very individualistic, there is this idea that you have to carry the entire burden yourself. And it's strength to actually show that I can carry all of this by myself. But I think that even in the journey of self-love and care, the more allies and the more support and the more community that you can build around it with people who are safe with you, the better actually that journey is. So being able to actually, and I think about this with some women in my life who are mothers, who are working full-time jobs and caring for their kids, and they do have very loving partners, but because they have decided and taken on the load themselves of, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this because he's just not going to do it well enough, or whatever it is, you have decided to somewhat take on the load versus being okay with if things aren't perfectly the way you want it to be, it's okay. But I say this in saying that then when they go on this self-love identity journey, they also think that they need to keep this to themselves as they are reshaping themselves. And then what happens is the people in their life start thinking, oh, you're distancing yourself. Oh, our daughter-in-law is no longer showing up in this way, or our daughter is not, or our brother isn't, or a son-in-law isn't, or whatever it is, right? And what I say is in those moments to these women is reach out and let those closest to you know that, hey, I'm trying to figure out myself right now. And I'm doing this while I still have kids to take care of, while I still have a job that is really stressful to go to, while I still have demands from all sides of the family giving me guilt about how I am not doing enough, how I'm this, how I'm that. And my response to that is, well, then call in the people who make you feel safe. Call me in. Let me know, hey, listen, I need you to help me set boundaries around this, or I need you to help me, be my bodyguard when it comes to this, and I'll step in. I'll help you as my friend, as my, sister, as my whatever it is. I will step in for that. And I say that to them to say that there has to be one person in your family that you feel safe with. And if not family, your friend, someone you feel safe with, that you can say to them, I'm going on this journey and I'm in this system, but I need someone to help support me as I'm going through this.
Yeah.
And I think that is also just so important for us to recognize that you mentioned this earlier, and I wholeheartedly believe it, that self-love journey and the identity of knowing your worth, knowing your value, knowing who you are happens in community and happens with community. It doesn't necessarily happen as isolated, because as humans, we live in social structures and social systems. And it's important for us to be able to get to a place where we can say to them, I'm going on this journey. Either you're with me or you're not, but I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And having those people then show up for you and say, all right, I got you. What do you need? How can I be that support pillar for you as you are breaking down and building yourself back up?
Yeah, and I think there's something that I definitely want to say around that. So I think, and here's something that is coming from me in particular, and it's a thought that I have around that. When I was going through my healing journey, I didn't think anyone was going to understand what I was going through. And I had it wrong. And so I think that when we come from certain families, and like mine, where there is a lot of trauma, a lot of toxicity, and very little healing happening, especially to the capacity that I was diving into, and even my community, I didn't think that people were really going to get it. And that was a mistake that I made. Give people the benefit of the doubt that the people who love you want to show up to support you. Because one of the things that I thought I had to do was create a whole nother community of people who would understand the journey that I was actually going through. And so thus I could be honest with those individuals. And I think it's both, right? When you are going through healing, you are going to change. There are aspects of you that are going to be shed and that you will grieve. And there are aspects of you that you will take on that will be whole new representations of the person you are becoming. And therefore you will gravitate towards new people, new conversations, new things. But that doesn't mean you have to believe that the old cannot also come along with you or exist along that journey too. And so oftentimes in my path, I thought I cannot be honest with the people around me or talk to them in the way that you're talking about because, they just don't get it. They're not going through the same journey. They're not going to understand it. And I would definitely repeat much of what you said and also add on, yes, you will need new communities because you won't be the same person. You won't think about the same things. Some of the conversations that I used to have with friends, I seriously cannot sit through for even 1 second. So I can't be involved. I'm sorry. We're just not on the same vibe, right? And that's okay. But also give the people who love you the most the respect they deserve because they love you and they want to see you grow. Not everybody will, but those people will respect you. And it's funny because my parents ended up leaving Brooklyn and moving to Tennessee, to Knoxville. And I remember the day that my dad said, seeing you move to Miami gave me the strength and the courage to do this too. And so you never know who you're going to inspire in your family, in your community. And I think that's the biggest blessing of transformation is like you end up transforming the people around you. So yeah, I would say open up about it, talk to people about it, look for support around it. And actually, the more you open up, the more you realize who's coming and who's not. And I think that's a blessing in itself. And also seek out and create the new communities. I mean, you are such an integral part of that for me. I mean, you are one of the only people in my life that I feel I can be completely brutally honest with about all of the different things that I am going through. And so you were a part of, I know I need something different. How am I going to find that?
Because you honored me with that and allowed me into your safe space, I can't even begin to tell you what kind of an inspiration you have been. And, coming to Miami very recently and seeing you in your zone, in your space, the level of calmness I saw in you. I mean, it was a different Jasmine than I knew from 3 years ago, from 5 years ago. It really was. And it's beautiful to see that some challenges are still there as they were 3 years ago, but the way that you show up in them is vastly different. And what you just said about, your dad moving and him being inspired by you, I think that's the most powerful part. Is you're absolutely right that we think that this healing has to happen away from everyone and it's this private struggle. But I would say that private struggle that is going on is a symptom of all of those survival techniques that you're acting in, right? It's like the survival, the armor, everything that you talked about, I can love up until this extent and that's it. And part of that piece of, well, now healing is insanely vulnerable. It's insanely exposing yourself. And so to go from a place of, I only trust you up until this point to here, come into the most like naked part of my emotional journey. It's a hard one. So it totally is reasonable and understandable when people need to take their time to let others in. And again, I do want to say that, yes, there are sometimes families and there are some extreme situations where opening up to them is not the right choice. But there is somebody in your life, whether it's a coworker, a friend, a therapist, whoever it may be, there is someone that you can create that spaciousness with that will allow it. And I think that this is one of the things about relationships. We are in this space of saying that as you grow, you're going to let go of people and you're going to bring in new people, or, evolution of self means that, I'm not going to be around this anymore. And I think that we're sometimes teaching people that if you're not going to fit my life anymore, I'm going to cut you. Yeah. And what we're doing is that we're not teaching people the skill of what it means to be in hard moments of relationships and seasons of relationships, because you may have moments and seasons where you're not connected to them anymore because of what you're going through, but you may circle back. And so to say this black and white thing of you are now out of my life because you're no longer the version that I'm vibing with it's in a form, its own toxicity. Yes, there are 100% going to be people that need to be cut out. Absolutely. Because they're just going to because they are not ready for that journey and they are not there. And it's hard to be in that space. And this brings me actually to my final question with you, which is, and I mean, I could go on and we really could go on, but my final question to you is, what happens in our friendships, families, and workplaces when self-love becomes a shared value instead of a private struggle?
So do you mean when we all collectively are working on our self-love? Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful. It's really interesting because recently, so I've been single by choice now for almost 5 years, and I've really been focusing on this journey, like on me, on myself, because I was a serial monogamist for my whole life. I went from relationship to relationship to relationship and never really had the opportunity to define who I was. And so it was very important for me that when I noticed that these relationships kept crumbling, that, I looked at myself, like I am the common denominator here. And that's what triggered so much of my healing and so much of my self-love. And so your question, what's coming up for me is what's next, right? What's next in terms of my own journey? When you were speaking about, letting people in, when you were speaking about community, when you were speaking about not necessarily cutting people off, it made me think of my relationship with you, right? So I have a very deep relationship with you where you know the intimacies of my life and many things that are going on that people don't know about. And I am capable of being vulnerable with you and opening up with you, but I have never experienced this with a man. And that is something that terrifies me, is being the way that I am with the women in my life who support me and love me and know the deepest parts of me, and bringing that into a relationship with a man. So when you ask this question about what does it look like for self-love to coexist in all aspects of your world, it makes me think of the most important relationship I hope I get to experience in this lifetime, which is partnership in a healthy, healed, and whole way, where we equally get to bring to that partnership what self-love means to us individually so that we can create love together as a unit. And I believe that when you do love yourself, when you accept yourself wholly and fully. You get to represent yourself as the most authentic version of you in every space that you're in. And wouldn't it be a beautiful world? Wouldn't it be beautiful partnerships? Wouldn't it be beautiful communities if we wholly accepted every single part of us and brought that part without feeling like we had to change into every environment and relationship? And that is what I hope I can have and experience in this lifetime in partnership, because I feel as though I am bringing that into my relationships, but I have not yet experienced that in the relationship that I hope to experience it in this lifetime.
I think that is so beautiful. And what I think is so special and important about that is that when we open ourselves up and like the journey and the work that you have been doing, I think that it actually opens us up to experiencing that there are men and there are life partners out there who are also craving that. And we attract that then. I don't think that, when people say like, you don't need to go on this self-love journey to get married and to have like, to be in partners. And they're absolutely right. And you clearly experienced that in your life too. And it's like, you don't have to go through this if you want to be married and, you've got the checklist going and everything. But if you want and you're craving that deep love of being seen, of partnership in the way where I see it as some of my friends who I see and admire, that they're truly best friends with their partner. And you see that in their relationship 10, 15, 20 years in. That's what I see as like success, not the relationships where all they're doing is berating each other, putting each other down, even in public in front of others. That is not what I consider a happy, successful relationship. And I don't look to them for role models. But yeah. So what you're talking about truly is that when you have accepted who you are in this continuous journey of self-love, you are then attracting that individual and that man who can also hold that space with you.
Yeah, and the people, the communities. I mean, I can look at all of my relationships that I have now, and I can say that each relationship brings so much love to my life. Even the relationships that are challenging. I've healed many aspects of my relationships with my parents. I would say that we are in the best sense of love, or at least I am in the best sense of love with them. That doesn't mean it's not challenging. It's
I feel you on that.
Yeah, like it's a beautiful place to be. And there is still more. I tell people, I recently had someone say, like, you just seem so happy, like you're at the epitome of your happiness. Yes, and there's so much more to go. Like I just mentioned, it's terrifying for me to think about being in a relationship with a partner and being so vulnerable and so open with that person. There's still so much more work to do. And I'm so incredibly excited because for the first time, I've gotten to a place in my life where it's amazing and it's only going to get better. And that's what I think is the most powerful part of healing and transformation and reinvention. You said it's not pretty. It isn't. Nothing about what has happened to any of us has been pretty, but I think we will all sit here in truth and say every single moment of it was fully worth it to experience what we're experiencing today and to know that it's only going to get better.
Oh, Jasmine, I could talk to you forever. And
we have spoken for.
I know we have spoken forever.
Not today, but there are days we've spoken for hours.
My friends, this is I would say, like, we haven't even touched the surface of how deep Jasmine and I go in our like conversations. Like this is, when I say like this is like the tip of the frosting of the icing that is, that we typically and how deep we typically go. So I know you're going to be back. We're going to do more deep dives about what it means to be in relationship with self and community and bring you back in that journey. Because I think even going deeper into what it means to be in relationship then with dating and with everything, especially in this epidemic that we're having right now around loneliness, I think is really, really important. So I can't wait to have you back. How can everyone find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for this conversation. And before we go, I want to say that you recently visited me in Miami and you actually triggered the next level of transformation for me that I didn't even know was necessary through one question that you asked me. And it was since you've left, so much has transpired just from one question. And so I just want to say thank you, because you've always been one of the mirrors that I've needed in my life to undergo the change. And you've always, always, always been honest. And I think that's the most beautiful part of the friendships and the relationships that you create during transformation, is the level of honesty that you get to have with one another. It's really beautiful. So where do you find me? So I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I recently just got on TikTok, not doing any dancing videos, just having some fun there. So you can find me in any one of those platforms. And the Courage Crew, as you mentioned earlier, is a community of women that I created. It's a membership community, and we undergo reinvention and transformation together. And the reason why I created that community was because, as through this discussion we've heard, much of this is testing. It tests you. It tests all different facets of yourself. And so to be able to have that community of women that are also going through it is incredibly powerful. And the community provides coaching from me, peer mentorship from the other women, courses, and everything to make this really accessible and easy to women who want to start and really take the next chapter of their lives to a different level, focusing on themselves and prioritizing their wants, their desires, and their happiness. And so that's another space you can find me that I love hanging out in.
I love it. All of this will be, of course, linked in the description. And love you, my friend. Love you so much. Thank you so much for being here.